says you may be able to help. My people need help. There have been many losses to the cartel, and the horrors inflicted by Yuri Polito have broken their spirit. The fires of revolution have almost gone out.
Spare me the rhetoric, Atari. Just tell me what you need.
There is a cartel supply convoy passing through the province soon. Capturing it would give my people much-needed supplies and restore their morale. Can you do this?
Consider it done.
Welcome to the world of Ghost Recon, Wildlands. And the dialogue of that mission that you just heard pretty much sums up most of the missions that you'll be playing in this open beta. Now sadly this leaves me with a little bit of a bad taste, as I thought this would actually add more excitement to the game and the missions. That doesn't appear to be true. Yes, this is a massive open world from Ubisoft, so that's not really a surprise, and as I already covered with my PS4 closed beta analysis, which will give you a history of the title and the game at large, this is a now full in-depth look at the work in progress, but the game is going to come out in a few weeks, released on both consoles and PC. Well, I'll say both consoles. It's currently 4 consoles if you include all the versions, but here I'm looking at the XB1S, the PS4 and the PS4Pro from the previous release, and then multiple PC configurations. That is 2 Nvidia powered PCs, one with an i5 4690K and the other one with an AMD FX 8350. Soon to be usurped by its younger brother AMD's Ryzen, which you can check out a preview video this weekend of that chip, and also my in-depth analysis of a build I'll be making next week to see just how good a complete AMD machine now is if you put one together and what it will cost you. But here I'm diving into the consoles and the PC. The PC version here for the FX 8350 is coming in with a GTX 750 Ti, so this is a budget look at the title, with the i5 and the GTX 970 showing you the higher end. So let's suit up and glitch out.
But I'm a creep. I'm a widow. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here.
Okay, I'm being a little silly there, but yes, the PC version is lacking a little more than the consoles, even though they're not completely devoid of their own issues. And I will be covering that in a separate video, just to say that this PC version is a little bit behind the curve, but I'm going to cover this as a technical analysis. You can check out that video for my specific thoughts on where the PC version sits and what Ubisoft should really be doing at this point. And so starting with that, we'll jump into the GTX 970 version, which is really the kind of machine you really want to run the version that's sitting here at the moment. And even then, do not expect anything near high settings. This is a very demanding title, which in and of itself is not a problem at all. But you are looking somewhere around the medium to high settings here. It's very VRAM limited on this card, and it's going to be very VRAM limited on many cards, because this game requires way more than 4 gig, upwards of probably 6 gig if you've got it on your card. So do not expect this game to run smoothly on a GTX 970 or in this video if you're anywhere near high. That's not to say the game doesn't look and run very well, and you can get pretty much identical to the console settings and around 60 FPS. It's not a locked 60, but it's near. So the game isn't a bad performer overall. There is just a lot of issues that you can check out in that separate video. Its settings menu must also be commended. It is probably the most detailed and clear to see what every single option changes with an on-screen visual as you flip between the two, which is very helpful indeed for people that can't see the difference. You still have to test it and you'll see it in this video, but you can see the draw distance, the level of detail, texture quality, the tessellation on the ground. All of these features can be customizable on the menu screen, and the fact that you can tweak it here individually, and also a very good inbuilt benchmark which gives you a score, and it gives you an idea of where the game sits. For example, when I benchmarked the 8350 and 750 Ti, it came out at low sub 1080, and that's about right. So jumping into the console versions, we see a difference in resolution, not a surprise. I've already covered the Pro, which runs at 2560 by 1440, and I'm seeing no signs of any dynamic resolution there, and that's the same on both console versions here. It does have a temporal element, which on the Pro I thought was pushing towards the HRAA. I'm no longer sure of that. In fact, I'm pretty convinced it's not. It's more like a very poorly implemented SMAA, and it looks worse on both consoles for some reason, with obvious banding and just basically duplicate frame merging between actions. You can see here when I slow it down and zoom in, you can see the birds literally double up as the frame moves, which is not a great implementation of the technique at all. Resolution wise, the Xbox One is the most frugal. Shock horror! Yes, this is 1600 by 900 in resolution. I've done a few counts in action and looking at obvious scenery to get long angles, and nothing seems to be dynamic here. I wouldn't be surprised if they're using a similar technique from Rainbow Six, but I'm leaning towards the fact that they're not, because I don't see the kind of artifacts on the edges that I've seen in other titles. Sadly, this game doesn't have a great temporal AA solution, and the Xbox One suffers the most due to that, with lots of blurring and movement in play, merging and blending these two along with the aliased edges, which isn't fixed at all even on the PS4, which runs at a native 1920 by 1080. As I mentioned already with my previous Pro analysis, the most impressive aspect of this title is the foliage system, which I believe has been taken from the Far Cry engine, and then the draw distance, which is incredible. Normally on consoles this is a sacrifice, but not so here. This engine handles it very well, allowing the PC and the PS4 and Xbox One S to basically run very similar settings even at the max draw distance and density. You can boost it further on the PC, which you can see examples on screen, but it's very minor indeed. One of the biggest benefits of the PC is basically bumping out the shadow quality in the shadow map to right out into further distance. Other boosts come from additions like HBAO over and above the SSBC that's running on PC and console here, and again you can increase tessellation on the ground, which is present on the consoles, and you can see examples of some of this on screen. So what you end up with is a average of around medium to high on the console compared to the PC. There are some weird quirks between the versions. On the PS4 here you can see missing textures on the wall, which is systemic of the entire engine itself. I believe the console versions are a few iterations or suffixes ahead of the PC version, and that needs to be retrofitted and coded back into that base whenever they get round to that, hopefully in time for release. But all versions suffer from these weird quirks, but it's an open world game. Some of these are part of the cause. This one comes from a rather cheap filter that's put on the background layer to keep the gradient level equal for the sky and the ground. You can see on screen as this video plays through an analysis of all the settings I've ticked off to show where these sit. One of the things that's missing there is motion blur is on the consoles. I think I missed it off. And textures are high, but other than that I think we're about the same. This means you get all the features like the depth of field, the bloom, the motion blur, the tessellated ground effect, which basically adds adaptive tessellation on a displacement map on the ground to raise and increase ridges, very similar to what we've seen in many other titles including games like Mad Max. So this is not a new feature, but it's nice that it's been implemented here on the consoles. And it just adds additional depth and detail to the world, which does help. When you look at it when it's turned off on PC, you can certainly see the difference and what it adds to the world. And this is not a free resource. This explains why the game is very GPU heavy and also CPU heavy. You would have seen on earlier analysis and my PC video that goes more in depth. This game uses all 4 cores of my i5 to 100% very often in the title. Now it doesn't seem to use the 8350 well up to the 8 core, so it doesn't scale as well, but it does use all 8 cores, unfortunately not to their maximum, which means you're not gaining much benefit there. Which brings me onto an overall view of the PC release. Like I say, it's behind the curve, which you can check out in that video, but the 8350 and 750 Ti are not up to the task at hand to run this anywhere near the level of the console. This means, as you can see on screen, I'm dipping it down to 80% resolution scaling and a combination of low and medium settings. This is VRAM limited. Remember, it's a 2 gig card here, so you really want to set the textures to low, but they look horrible. So you try and sacrifice something to get them somewhere around medium. The consoles run around high. I believe Ultra kind of again adds additional detail, but it's further out, so it's not something you're going to miss too much. High is the kind of middle ground that you want, not really an option on this card. And it feels sluggish and unresponsive to play. You can turn VSync off to try and improve that, but it's not going to fix the issues here. So overall, it's not my preferred method of playing this title. It needs far more power than this particular PC to run, and that really is indicative of the fact that the engine needs a little more work on its PC release. So the GTX 970 and the i5 does a much better job, running around 60 FPS, averaging around 54s. From overall tests here in play at similar settings, near enough as I can get to the consoles. If you go above that, then you are looking at a game that lurps between 30, 50. Nothing worse than frame times than 50 milliseconds, other than the issues which you can cover in that video. So it's a very similar looking title and a very beautiful looking title with additional benefits on the PC, but you do need quite a high level PC to run this. So on the PS4 Pro, they're identical settings to the other console releases. I'm not seeing any difference here between the Xbox One and the PS4 other than the resolution difference and the performance. So they both target 30 FPS, and that includes the Pro, sorry, so all three of them do. But unlike the Pro, which holds onto VSync all the time, both of these run VSync off, or a soft VSync, adaptive VSync. They're capped at 30, and when that doesn't hit the mark, then they dip and tear below that level. And this leaves a very unstable image quality on both consoles. The Xbox One S is ever so slightly worse, but not to any meaningful degree. This leaves you with a very unstable image quality and a very messy screen in general view. This is in action, bigger action. Some of the lighter points, it doesn't really cause it at all, but it's mostly from long draw distances, lots of geometry, bloom effects, lots of GPU heavy sections. These all cause it to dip below and tear. So this keeps the response as fast as possible. It hovers around the 27, 28, but the average is coming at 29 because of the fact you get these runs in there of 30 FPS when it's not being heavily stressed. But once you get into any action, it heavily tears here. The Pro version holds onto a locked VSync. Obviously the PC, you have the choice of either, whatever you want to choose. So this leaves you with a reasonably well responding game, but a little messy in its image quality due to all this tearing. It's one of the titles that actually benefits from the Pro due to the fact that it runs at a much higher resolution, therefore it's a lot cleaner and crisper, and also that its VSync is engaged, so you don't get any of these issues. And in fact, from my test and play, it's pretty much a locked 30, so that performs very well. In terms of performance, the GTX 970 can run all the settings at high, but you get horrible performance. It's all inconsistent. It really needs more VRAM, but other than that setting, you could cap it to 30 and run it and see how you get on. Not my preferred option. I'd stick to the 60 and similar console settings because you're not really going to see the visual benefits, or at least I don't notice them that much, for the sake of the performance. The 750 Ti comes out way below this. It suffers massively here, performing badly, looking terrible. If you set it to the level where you get nearly 30, then it looks like a last-gen Half-Life mod title, not something you'd want to play at all. So really, this isn't something I could recommend to anybody at all. It certainly needs a lot more work and time in the oven. In terms of the PC versions, this is where it sits. You need a pretty decent machine to play this game, and when you have got one, it does run well, it does look nice. In terms of consoles, it's pretty clear. Shockingly, the more expensive and most powerful console runs it best, the Pro. That's the one I would recommend if you can pick this game up. That's where you should play this title. The PS4 and the Xbox One aren't that far behind. They both suffer with their independent issues of resolution and image quality overall, further compounded by the tearing issues and the overall image quality of a poor SMAA type implementation of anti-aliasing doesn't really leave you with a beautiful looking game. It's very frugal in some of its polygon budget across the ridges. The texture quality is random and very varied across the board, not really high overall, and certainly some low places that stand out. It's a far cry from its original reveal. Now this isn't a problem fundamentally, but it doesn't deliver anything new in the world. It's vast and open, but all these things get a bit boring when you tend to find very clustered areas across all the maps, and you spend ages travelling between them. Flight and helicopter is the best way to get around, and the most enjoyable and the most visually pleasing, allowing you to admire the beauty of the weather system, which is a basic skybox with additional texture maps, allowing you to give a cloud pass, and then the rain comes in with simple decals and rain effects, with light reflection used on specular tones for things like puddles, which use cube maps, and then screen space reflections are kept for things like large bodies of water. The performance isn't great, it isn't bad, but it isn't great across both consoles. If you have the choice, the PS4 just about pips it due to its improved image quality, but there's hardly anything in it really. If you play this game side by side, you could see it. If you've got a lot of people online to play and you've got a lot of friends to enjoy, then it does make a lot more sense. But ultimately, it's not an impressive looking open world title, even if it has got some lovely features in there. Its dense foliage system and draw distance are its single biggest strengths and help push it above other titles of this genre, but it doesn't feel anything new at all, and all the weaknesses and the issues behind that of what I think was a very limited budget in the end to get it out the door does shine and stand out slightly compared to the higher quality of other titles. This is a shame, as it had a lot of potential here, and I like the Ghost Recon franchise, but unless the final game has a lot more inside it with its story and its action, This will be a chore, I feel, to grind through, no matter how many friends you have online. And I'm sorry to say that, Ubisoft, because I do like some of your work, but this isn't one that I'm going to jump in and buy, I'm afraid. And unless you guys want me to cover it in any more depth than this, which is pretty close to a final release, then you have to give me a lot more issue, because again, I have to buy all these titles myself. And as I am completely independent, this hasn't done enough to demand my spend. But you can see all the detailed analysis of what is pretty near to a final release at this point, except I feel the PC release will be pushed back. The real-time lighting system in the game and the passing time of day is its most impressive asset, aside the foliage, like I say. And collectively with the storm system, this can create very attractive and beautiful looking sections in the title. But these are fleeting, and it's not as if other titles aren't doing something very similar, even from the same company.
Quédate quieto.
Hey, we got enough. Okay, whoa. Over by the sand.
If you enjoyed this or anything else that I've put together, then you can always feel free to subscribe and please share where appropriate. Leave all your thoughts and comments below. I always like to reply and hear what you guys have to say. Give it a thumbs up if you did and a thumbs down if you didn't. And I'll catch you on the next one.
ID your targets. If Amaru gets killed by a stray
target
round,
down.
Operation Kingslayer will be dead in
Engaging
the water.
Tango.
Let's go.
We got a Sicario. B, C.
That's a C.
Moving to position. They're on alert. Say the word. Take cover already. He's dead.